What if the tools that you're using to protect your business are actually the ones slowing you down? Well, according to Worldwide Technology's Security Priorities for 2025 report, many organizations are drowning in overlapping tools, redundant features, and platforms that don't talk to each other. The result? Bloated budgets, underutilized tools, and security teams struggling to keep up with the real threats. Well, that's why Priority 4 focuses on optimizing your security tools portfolio, ensuring your investments deliver maximum value without unnecessary complexity. But here's the real question. Do you actually have the right tools for the coverage that you need? Well, Matt Berry, Global Field CTO for Cybersecurity at WWT, works directly with security leaders to help them navigate these challenges.
Every organization is being asked to do more with less. And I think there's just this relentless pursuit to prioritize because we don't have enough hours in the day. We don't have enough money in the budget. And so there's a necessary task that all leaders have to really look at their tool set and ask themselves the hard questions. Do I have the right tools to provide the coverage that I need?
Justin Peterson, Senior Director at WWT, has spent years helping clients optimize their security strategies. He sees the same problem from the implementation side.
Most organizations have about 60 to 70 separate cybersecurity software, centered around about 10 to 15 vendors. That's sprawl. And that's sprawl and that's cost. And if you don't have a strategy and if you aren't aligned to it, it's going to draw down your organization.
So how do you turn your security stack from a liability into an asset? Well, the answer isn't just smarter tools, it's making better use of the tools and resources you already have. But how do you do that? That's exactly what we're unpacking today. My name is Rob Boyd. Welcome to WWT Presents Research.
WWT Presents Research.
You mind telling us what you do for Worldwide Technology, and especially as it pertains to today's tools optimization conversation?
Absolutely. Pleasure. So Justin Peterson, I'm a senior director here at Worldwide Technology, specifically within the security consulting and engineering organization. Essentially, we're responsible for delivering the professional services and consulting service engagements here at WWT that we offer to our customers and clients.
All right. So you're interacting with a cross-section of people on a regular basis. And I imagine this goes for both of you. You've got teams of smart people behind you. Matt, same question to you. What you up to? What do you do for Worldwide these days?
Yeah, so in my current role at Worldwide, I'm the Global Field CTO for Cybersecurity. I work primarily on the sort of the pre-sales solutioning side. So I spend a lot of time having conversations with customers, understanding their challenges, talking about trends that we're seeing in the industry, and ultimately trying to help them figure out how they can architect the kinds of outcomes that they're looking for.
Excellent, because that's what we need to do here today is we're talking about Priority 4, and we're talking about the need for tools optimization, specifically security tools. And I feel like that's one thing I've always loved about security. There's always a new threat, and there's always a new set of tools to address said threat. But that very quickly can become a bunch of tools that we may or may not know how to use or necessarily integrate with each other. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but Matt, tell me what is important about this as a topic for CISOs and other interested IT parties today.
I think ultimately as security leaders, what keeps us up in the middle of the night is trying to ensure that we are providing the right level of security controls. We're providing the right fixes and coverage for all of the threats that are out there today and the emerging ones that we're going to find out about tomorrow morning when we wake up and we read, CNN or Bloomberg. And I think that as leaders, the challenge is how do you provide the necessary level of protection while also delivering on other objectives that come to you from the organization. And a big piece of that is being fiscally conservative. Every organization is being asked to do more with less. And I think there's just this relentless pursuit to prioritize because we don't have enough hours in the day. We don't have enough money in the budget. And so there's a necessary task that all leaders have to really look at their tool set and ask themselves the hard questions of, do I have the right tools to provide the coverage that I need? And what changes do I need to make today? And what do I need to plan for, in the next 12 to 18 months?
I want to come back to the part of your statement there, which is do I have the right tools for the coverage that I need? Which I feel like there's a whole lot behind just that coverage that I need. Who can answer that part of the question? But before we get there, Justin, any comments on why tools optimization is a necessary topic today?
Yeah, Matt hit it on the head. We commonly see this on our side, and it comes down to cybersecurity essentially is a below the line function. They're not necessarily seen as a cost enabler. They're centered around preventing this hypothetical breach when quantifying that from a leadership perspective to your leaders is hard. So cybersecurity is often centered around the ask, the monetary ask, the people ask, the process ask. And it often leads to, if we look at the cybersecurity market, I think it comes out that most organizations have about 60 to 70 separate cybersecurity software, centered around about 10 to 15 vendors. That's
Yeah.
sprawl. And that's sprawl and that's cost. And if you don't have a strategy, and if you aren't aligned to it, it's going to draw down your organization. It's going to be get a hamper. And that's why you're seeing these vendors shift their strategy to a more, hey, come to us for that platformization approach. Come to us to help us rationalize your ecosystem, because it's a heavy hitting topic. As Matt said, we're
Yeah.
drawing down costs. And from a cybersecurity perspective, it's hard to depict that value when you're consistently being hampered by the cybersecurity market and the 4-letter acronyms, by this, by that, by this.
Well, where do you guys, either one of you could take this first, but in your interaction with customers and with clients, where is their head at? Is this something that they already realize and you're just helping them put words to it? Or is it something you're having to wake people up and say, hey, you need to slow down, take a pause and reassess, and we'll go through how to potentially do that in a certain order?
A lot of what we see, customers already realize it, but the challenge is they don't have necessarily the strategy to overcome. Having software and tool set sprawl it's a difficult hurdle, because you start to have team and process and people identities centered around the software instead of the service. So when it comes to rationalizing the tool set and dealing with vendors that want to push the platformization approach, it's not just a simple fact of adopting a new technology. It's adopting new people, new processes, retraining, and actually changing team identities that we're finding. If you have a team in your organization that's called the CrowdStrike team, imagine going to them and saying, we need to shift strategy. It gets hard. Because the identity is based on what the platform used to be. Now take that across potentially 60 different cybersecurity software vendors. That's where the difficulty gets in. And that's where the strategy needs to be had.
There's something, it's not just about the individuals, I think, that have poured their careers into understanding certain things, and that becomes important to them, of course, but reverse it from the company perspective. If I'm making decisions, maybe those decisions do need to be weighted in terms of, well, what are the capabilities of the team I have in place or the team I'm prepared to hire to operate in that environment. And that probably needs to be weighed in with any changes you're considering. Matt?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point. And I think that when we sit down with customers and we talk to them about tool sprawl, management challenges are evident. There's operational challenges that are evident. And so whenever you sit down and start mapping out the products that customer uses in order to provide the necessary controls, there's a lot of hidden costs that exist, not only in the current state, but also with the proposal to move to a future state. Justin mentioned use the example of, you have the CrowdStrike team. Many times we get involved with conversations with customers where procurement or IT is coming to them and saying, hey, we have already made an investment, for example, in Microsoft from like an E5 licensing perspective. And they say it's already a sunk cost. We're already basically paying for a set of security tools. And we have a mandate from the board or from executive leadership in order to reduce costs. So why don't we just rip out one solution and put another solution in? There's a lot of operational costs involved with even that thought process of, how do I shift an operator who is used to using one tool over to a different tool? You have training, you have integration challenges, you have a lot of automation and orchestration on the back end. So this concept around portfolio consolidation is really important. And we find that our customers really value the perspective that we can provide as we go in and have those conversations, because we're bringing up some of those unknown unknowns that customers don't know to think about when they're caught in the midst of a mandate like this.
It ties into the approach WWT takes for engagements like this. We bring an approach that's very specialized to the customer. A lot of organizations and a lot of internal, like they'll bring you, hey, you need the best in breed. You need the best in breed tied to defense in depth. And I have a term that I coined that just leads to expense in depth.
Oh, I like that.
You're
Okay.
just buying things to be behind things, but it's not best for your organization. So when
Yeah.
WWT approaches these rationalization, these platformization discussions, we don't like to align to like an anonymous framework and says, this framework says you should have that because it's not specific to you, right? And we will go in and we take account of your people and your processes and your technology. Who do you have relationships with? What are those contracts? And we're never just going to recommend something that this is the best in the market, top right, have it. You'll be good to go, because that doesn't make sense. The whole concept of
Yeah.
platformization is big in the market, but also as you get larger as an organization, like you don't want to undersimplify platformization. Like the custom platformization and creating a platform for your organization that fits your needs is key. And that's how we approach it. You don't want to, that best in breed, that cybersecurity market, that top right, it's easy to kind of shift your gaze over there and be distracted from the real prize, which is your strategy.
Security, the industry, by its very nature, is unfortunately reactive, in that none of us can get budget for things that haven't happened yet, despite how well we can forecast it. Certain industries, sure, that's what they have to do, but it feels like so much of our business, from a defense standpoint, is about reacting to some new offense that we hadn't predicted. And I feel like maybe that comes into our approach to tools, unfortunately. Then we need to be aware, hey, you can't have that approach to tools. You need to think pragmatically about how you're approaching this so that you can then make a coordinated set of decisions that are data-based and appropriate for your situation. Getting ahead of myself a little bit because I want to get into the action steps. So every research paper has, of course, the priorities. We're in priority 4, and there's a certain number of action steps, which are very specific things that Worldwide Technology, from the research perspective, is recommending. Let's start with step 1, which says define a strategic approach to security tools. Matt, you talked a little bit about some of this, but what's important to understand here? What does this make you think about?
We are living and operating at a time of just unprecedented innovation. And that innovation occurs not only on the good side of the fence, but also on the bad side of the fence. Just like we're talking about great technological innovations to defend, on the dark web, attackers exchange similar conversations about the latest innovations for how they can attack organizations. We're seeing attack
They're
patterns.
coordinating. Why
They're-
aren't we coordinating better? Yeah.
Exactly. They're coordinating, and we worldwide, we've been doing a lot of research even around the North Korea remote worker attack vector that has sort of come up in recent years. And so I think what's important about having this strategic approach, what I would add to the conversation, is the strategy that you used between 2 and 4 years ago, when you selected particular tools. Well, that strategy needs to change. Why? Because the attack vectors have changed. We've also seen in the last 5 years, like a massive shift towards the cloud, right? So you may have a security portfolio with heavy investments in on-premise security, vendors who have invested heavily on that side of the fence, and your organization's threat profile has changed. And so there really is a need to sit down and ask yourself, where are the majority of attacks coming in today? Where is our biggest area of concern? And allow that to be a sort of a key indicator that drives your platformization conversations and ultimately your decisions.
So a set of pre-questions and considerations. Justin, you're nodding on that one.
Yeah, it's every time I'm asked to engage a conversation with a new CISO, the kind of brief me when I'm meeting with account teams, the first thing I ask is, what is their goalpost? Because if they don't have a goalpost, then we shouldn't even be talking about technology, because you do not know what you're aligning to. So that strategy is the goalpost, and it serves multi-purposes. It serves as a risk-based posture of where you are, where you want to go. And then as you're presenting to your leadership of, I need funding for X process, mechanism, or people, you align it to that goalpost, right? You are
Yeah.
aligning. And Matt's absolutely correct. Like, we see too many strategies that are aligned to these frameworks that are single points in time, rarely get updated. They're not moldable to the threat
The
environment that
dynamics. Yeah.
organizations face. And that's the approach we take. Like, I'll go through a pharmaceutical vertical and I'll say, let me help you define that goalpost. What's the top 20 threat actors that target you? We have that information. What techniques are they using? And then we take their
Yeah.
technique and align them to a framework like Mitre Defend. We overlay that with their tools. And then we have identifiable gaps of priorities of saying, hey, they're using these techniques and you have no tool set that's preventing or monitoring or detecting them. That's how you get a more adaptable and moldable model, because as those threats change, that framework's going to change, right? And that's how you go to
Yeah.
your leadership and say, I need this tool set because of this priority gap. We're actively being targeted by this today.
Yeah. So this thing is supposed to, we invest here to get this return. Even though those are financial terms, it feels like still a responsible thing to potentially consider. Well, we're touching on this already, but step 2, identify critical business functions and necessary security tools. So I'm curious in this one, in terms of identifying the necessary security tools for the risks that you indeed care about and are faced with, because I think those may not always be the same thing, because we have to assume that the budget's limited. So where are you going to apply it? But Justin, how many clients do you think out of those 70 tools you mentioned earlier, how many of them potentially aren't getting the value out of their tools because they haven't taken the time to actually learn those tools and see how they might work better together?
A majority of them.
Hmm.
Enough that I have a practice centered around value realization of tool sets. Like, it's a
Talk
notorious
more. That
issue
sounds interesting.
that we have within the industry. And actually vendors, OEMs, are trying to shift their strategy to prevent this because it impacts their customer success and customer loyalty. You'll look
Yeah.
at Palo Alto, for instance, they're shifting their strategy to a more platformization approach. Like, hey, buy our platform and it'll prevent that tool sprawl, which this used to be just an idea. Like, it used to be an idealized idea where I remember when I was on the client side, you meet with the vendor, they show you this PowerPoint slide, and it's just lines of integrations with all their technology. And you're sitting there being like, there's no way this is possible. Like, who do you actually
PowerPoint-based
have that's
integration.
doing this? The industry is shifting. The industry is shifting because they're trying to alleviate the cybersecurity talent market concerns, the need for consistent uptraining of talent. I mean, you look at the SIM architecture, there's KQL, SPL, XQL, all these languages that folks need to learn to operate. The platformization approach is being brought in to fix that and to resolve it. So we are seeing it. It's around this value realization. We go into organizations and even when we do that threat centered approach from the defend perspective, we'll even call out like, you're paying for all these features. This is an easy gap to fulfill if you just implement a value realization program on this technology instead of investing in net new. And that's the big thing. Like, again, what relationships do you have? What do you have in place? And what are your people uptrained on? And that's where WWT will take their approach and said, hey, ignore all the market noise. Let's look at how you're set up and make something that's right for you.
Yesterday's platformization and platform approach is different from today's. I do think there are vendors who are doing a good job of figuring this out because of the integration nightmares. But Matt, is it different? Am I thinking of that correctly? In that when we think, if we have an old notion of saying, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket, we used to say, I'm going best of breed. And then the value is how I, as a human, is able to integrate these technologies to analyze logs and make the connections that no one else can. I don't think that's realistic these days, but are the tools rising to the occasion for platform?
I think what we have seen what I've seen personally over the last probably 7-8 years is it's becoming increasingly difficult to create a single reference architecture for security. With just the way that technology has expanded. We now have cloud. We have the introduction of AI. So I think more and more this conversation around platformization, or I'll use the term that always used to be used previously, getting everything under a single pane of glass. I think that those hopes are pretty much eroded. I think that even when you talk around platformization, you're probably going to end up with a handful of different platforms that are working together. Just because of how, you consider now not only on-prem security, you're talking about mobile users. So you're getting into, your SASE and your SSE conversations. You're talking about applications that are living across multiple hyperscalers. You add in the complexity around AI and the need to govern the use of AI. So I think that the one comment that I will say sort of harkens back to something Justin was talking about is when we have conversations around platformization, it is really important to look at who are the vendors that you have already selected, you've already onboarded, you already have established legal contracts and paperwork, procurement already understands who those individuals are. And sometimes in the span of 2 to 3 years, an OEM themselves undergoes a pretty large change. They may have acquired some companies to add capabilities. They may have developed them in-house. So I think that, sometimes the platformization conversation is not just looking externally at what is a new platform that we can bring on in order to jettison some that we have today. I think more often than not, the most prudent conversation is who are the vendors that we already have in place today? What innovations have they brought forth in the last 2 to 3 years? What acquisitions have they brought forth? Because you may have a partner who was originally brought on as a next gen firewall partner, but now they're operating best of breed in email security, or they're operating best of breed in SASE, SSE, SD-WAN. So I think it goes back to just needing to keep up to date with all the vendors out there, what they're doing and how their strategies have shifted, and then understand how we can leverage that to our advantage to reduce costs and increase protection from a security standpoint.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Justin, I'm curious, moving on to step 3, where we talk about evaluate integration and interoperability. I like some of the framework you've put around these things, but how do you begin to, well, I mean, some of it you may know, I guess, but how hard is it to figure out, to also assess those tools, not only for their ability, their efficacy against specific threats, but also how well they work together and why that might be important?
This is one of the reasons why I love to work at WWT, to be honest. It was often where I saw this hypothetical next generation topology on a piece of paper and it was just handed to me. Like, this is it. But the beauty of what I get to do at WWT is I make those next generation hypothetical topologies. But I also, instead of saying this is it, I say, hold me accountable. And what we can do and what we do, we have a robust ATC environment, a cyber range environment, where when I work with clients, I actually know the art of the possible because I build it for them, right? I build those custom environments full of integrations. And I say, not only test it, but also let's have your SOC go through a real world red teaming exercise and get comfortable with it. Does it work for them? Right? That single pane of glass approach. All too often, we have security architecture teams, network architecture teams kind of speaking on behalf of the SOC. Like, the beauty of what I get to do at WWT, I speak to both sides, right? And I get the comfortability on both sides. So it's hard. Like, I realize it's hard from a client side perspective because I've been there to say, I'm going to test. But we all know what test looks like on the client side environment. It's either some small offshoot lab, or we test in some non-prod environment that's not fully robust from what production looks like, real world traffic. And then you get to implement things and you're like, oh, this doesn't work. And that's where we start having value realization problems, right? Value realization problems from an adoption, business buy-in, and the people centered around and trained up to it. So this is where the strength of WWT is. It's a lot of going into a customer's environment is making them see that they can do so much more, and then presenting them the environment to be shown that and have hands on. So.
I like that. And I like the fact that you got a little passionate there for a moment. I like the normally reserved Justin's like,
that's right.
Wait a minute. I really like this question. Number 4 is around budget considerations and total cost of ownership, which I feel like has been around as long as single pane of glass. Um, but on this one, Matt, is there any money to be saved from rationalizing your tools, or is it just about operational and capability increases? Is What's the budget like in these things?
Yeah, it's interesting. So some of the research that we're seeing is in spite of the challenges that customers have around managing tools, and in spite of the fact that they would like to reduce the number of tools out there, we're seeing from our conversations that probably about 65% of our customers are anticipating adding more tools to their portfolio. They're also anticipating receiving more budget from a security perspective as they go into next year. So it's a really interesting situation where we have customers who recognize they have too many tools, while at the same time saying they're going to get more tools. On one hand, saying they need to be fiscally conservative, but on the other hand, saying that they're likely going to receive more budget from a security perspective. So it's a very weird situation to be in. I think
Yeah.
what decision you make, it may take 12 to 18 months before you really realize whether it was a decision viewed positive in the eyes of management or not. But I think when it comes to from a fiscal responsibility perspective, not looking at OpEx, let's just talk about CapEx. I
Okay.
think that with a number of vendors out there, we have seen them investing much more in enterprise license agreements, in looking for ways to, from their perspective, they want to capture more of the spend of customers. They're beholden to their shareholders, and they need to show, positive increases. And they're being much more aggressive in terms of, lumping in additional capabilities. Sometimes those capabilities are coming from acquisitions that have been made, or a product that they have developed in house that may not be considered best of breed. But when looking at the ideal customer profile, it's actually a solid choice for what a customer may need. They may not need 20 to 30 different features. There's only like 5 or 10 features in a particular domain that they really need in order to check the box and provide the necessary security. So I think that with some of our partners, we're seeing sort of an uptick in conversations around enterprise license agreements, where you're actually able to bundle many different capabilities together, move, your spend to fewer vendors. And there are some cost realizations that can occur there without just having to rely on OpEx.
So before we run out of time, there's one more step, step 5. And Justin, I'm curious. This one talks about to consider a hybrid type of approach, which has got a little bit of best of breed, I guess, and then maybe more of a platform play as a central component, perhaps. But I also feel like as soon as I say that out loud, that I'm like, well, wait, what does that mean from an integration perspective? Is that a reality, or does it have to be a reality anyway? Because no one vendor is going to solve every unique client concerns, and there's always going to be some balance. But what are your thoughts on the ability to consider a hybrid approach based on what
Yeah,
we've already
it
said is important?
it comes down to that oversimplification again. Like the platformization sometimes oversimplifies like what an organization actually has to go through. And I call it WWT's approach is more custom platformization. And a platform for a larger organization is holistically integrated. ULAs are like, you go get a car wash, it's a $20 car wash, and then you get the receipt that says if you come back in 3 days, you get a free car wash afterward. The value of that is only if you come back in 3 days to take that car wash. And it's the same with
Yeah.
ELAs. Like, and we get this a lot with organizations. ELAs aren't simple because the only value is there if you fully optimize and utilize what you're paying for, right? So you're going into this platformization approach, you're spending a lot of money. 3 years down the road, you're going to a renewal and you're going, oh no, what the heck am I
Yeah.
paying for? Like I'm only paying for half of this. So ELAs only make sense if it's your holistic custom platform strategy, right? Does it integrate with how your SOC operates? Does it integrate with your ticketing software? Does it integrate with your SIM? Does it integrate with your hyperscaler platform that you're using? How is your organization best positioned from a relationship perspective, a people perspective, and then existing tools? That's your custom platformization. It doesn't have to be a single vendor because no single vendor is going to do it all. It's specific to your organization, but that takes a lot of homework. It takes a strategy. It takes to know what you're using, how you're using it, and how you're going to
Yeah.
use it in the future. The capabilities of that OEM beyond what you're paying for, and then what your people trained on. Like there's a lot of homework internally that has to be done. And that's why WWT comes in and we have this holistic approach from a services perspective, kind of to help you figure it out.
One thing that I think gets overlooked is I think in many situations that I've seen in my client interactions that you need a third party to weigh in because there's probably going to be a lot of decisions that are not going to be popular with everybody, but yet are necessary for the greater good, so to speak. Oversimplification. But as we close out here, Matt, I feel like Justin's done a good job of selling WWT, and that's no shade being thrown there because I think that's an important skill set. I want you to do this too. When it comes to someone who's listening to this and going, that's our situation. I don't even know all the tools we have. I'm not sure we even know which problems they're solving. It'd be fascinating perhaps to see a graph of what's being used and what's not. I'm sure things like that get produced. How should someone approach worldwide technology and where do people tend to get started? Can you address that, Matt?
Yeah, certainly. I mentioned it earlier, this concept of the unknown unknowns. I think we all have those. And I think that's the value of having a trusted partner that is not just going to come in and sell you a list of SKUs, but is going to journey with you, throughout for the next several years at least, or likely longer, to be able to have those types of regular conversations. We find that our customers often come to us and they say, "Hey, what are our peers doing? In the global FI space, what are other banks doing? What are other healthcare organizations doing?" And I think that that's one of the big values that we provide at Worldwide is we work across so many industry verticals, and then also security touches everything, right? So I think another differentiator for Worldwide is we don't just focus deeply in security. We have some of the world's leading experts in data center, in cloud, in digital transformation. And so when we're tackling these problems, we're not only looking at it through a particular lens of an industry vertical, or even just the lens of cybersecurity. We can bring in multiple different perspectives to uncover those unknown unknowns. And so as you engage with us, there's sort of a dance between, my team and Justin's team. Justin's team comes in very, very programmatically. They can come in for, shorter engagements or longer engagements with very clear outcomes that they're looking to drive. And that's critically important, especially when you're trying to deliver results to leadership, to, regulatory and compliance. And then where my team comes in is just those ongoing conversations over lunch, over coffee, the 1 hour workshop here or there, all throughout the process of saying, okay, where are you at today? Where are you wanting to go? How did the last engagement go? What are the trends? And so there's sort of an interplay that needs to take place between more intentional programmatic work and then that relationship that lasts over a long period of time. And I think we at Worldwide are really uniquely positioned to provide that to our customers.
Oh, that's good. And makes me think I need to be having lunch with you guys more often. Justin, final comment. I could tell you were jumping to say something there, I figure, but let me give you the final word. What's important to remember here?
Have a strategy, have a goalpost. I always tell my organization, don't keep up with the cybersecurity market, keep up with fiscal year-end reports for organizations, because we want to target what's targeting you. What are your challenges are? Realize that for your organization perspective. Make that goalpost. Don't get saturated by the market lingo, the platformization, the marketization of cybersecurity. Make it specific to your org.
Perfect. I love that. Thank you guys so much. Cybersecurity governance isn't just checking boxes anymore. It's enabling business in a risk-filled world. As Mario put it, good governance gives companies the ability to be agile, innovative, and ultimately survive and grow. When security and business priorities align, you move faster without sacrificing protection. The days of governance as a back office function are over. It's now a competitive advantage that earns trust from customers, confidence from regulators, as well as a seat at the executive table. So are you ready to strengthen your approach? Download the 2025 Security Priorities Report using the link below or connect directly with WWT experts for everything from quick assessments to hands-on implementation. I want to thank you for joining us on WWT Presents Research. We'll see you next time.
This episode is brought to you by Wiz. Secure everything you build and run in the cloud. Wiz is the unified cloud security platform with prevention and response capabilities, enabling security and development teams to build faster and more efficiently.